Hello, everyone. Welcome to Automation Makes You More Human. I know we're probably still getting some people trickling in, so feel free to throw your name, where you work, what you do, what part of the country you're in. Say hi to everyone in the chat, and we'll just give folks another minute or two to join up here. But maybe while we do that, a quick round of introductions for those who are in here. My name is Tony. I'm an implementation engineer here at Front. I work on our post-sales team to help our customers implement technical solutions. And I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Sophia, or Sophie, as she goes by. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Tony. So I'm Sophie. I'm Partner Development Manager at Zapier, and my main focus is basically helping partners like Front find really new ways of improving user experience and helping everyone understand the benefits of really automating your tasks.
Awesome. And I'm seeing some comments trickle in here. We got Austin, Texas. My sister lives there. Love that. Guatemala, California. Roswell, Georgia. Leeds in the UK. Wow. I'm happy you joined us during what would normally be your happy hour slot, I'm sure. We got Phoenix. We got Deborah in Brazil. So all over the place. Got a couple of people from Brazil, actually, which is exciting to see.
You have a few Canadians, too. So
yeah, look at that. I know Sophie is in Canada. She's in Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, Vancouver, British Columbia.
And I myself am in San Francisco, California. So it looks like we have a large percentage of the world represented at Italy, Hawaii, which I did not know was a place. So all over the place, super excited. Thank you everybody for joining us. One thing just to set the stage, I know you may not have been on live stream before or live storm. So we do have a questions tab. So feel free if you have questions as we're going through this to drop those in there. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. So we'll tackle any of your questions at the end. But if you want to just jot them down so that you don't forget them, feel free to use the questions tab. And then the other thing is we are going to have a couple live polls for you. So you may see something pop into that polls tab. Feel free to jump in there and answer as things go. But maybe, Sophie, I'll pass it over to you to intro our first poll to the users.
Yeah, so really excited about chatting more about how to really make automation a more personalized experience. So before we dive in, I'd love to get some input from everyone on, how many hours do you typically spend doing tasks that you wish you could really automate? So I'll give everyone a little bit of time to really participate in the poll and add your thoughts. Feel free to comment in the chat as well if you have more to kind of add to that.
I see we got a great comment already. 39 hours. Most people work 40 hours a week. So it sounds like 1 hour spent doing something that you can't automate. Love it.
Yeah, another one came in saying about 10 hours. As a company, over 30 hours. Ashley mentions that there, so it's a ton of time. It adds up pretty quick.
Cool, so it looks like we have a good representation in the poll. The numbers look pretty stagnant. Sophie, it looks like we're at 7+ hours per week. 54, 50, now 57%, and the number keeps going up. I don't know if it's because I introduced the highest option, but the numbers are pretty high here. So I think we have a captive audience who's eager to learn here.
Yes, always excited to hear that.
Cool. So maybe with that, we'll kick things off into the first topic that we really want to tackle here, which is that automation. It does make you more human, but it also is usually a key player in disruption in most industries. Automation, sometimes you might have these like post-human scenes of like Terminator, things like that. That isn't automation. That's what Hollywood portrays automation as. Automation is actually way more tangible than that. And it happens actually, surrounds probably something you've already done today. But one example that comes to mind that I thought of when Sophie and I were talking about this was Uber and Amazon are actually examples of automation that you're leveraging in your daily life. Uber was a disruptor for the taxi industry, and they're going to continue to be a disruptor as they slowly work on rolling out self-driving cars. Remember before when you wanted to go get a bite to eat at a bar with a friend or something, back when that was allowed, and you would have to call up a taxi, and then the taxi would say, oh, we'll be there in 15 minutes. And you sat there and 30 minutes went by, your taxi wasn't there. Well, Uber came up with automation to solve that problem. They automatically route those cars to you based off the location of the driver. So, and likewise, I'm sure none of us would want to go back to the idea of a normal taxi after taking an Uber or a Lyft. And then Amazon is another example, right, Sophie, where now you're no longer waiting days or weeks for your package. If you have Amazon Prime, it's showing up to your doorstep in 2 or 3 days, most likely. So these are both examples of automation that we all see in our everyday life. Sophie, what examples come to mind for you when you're thinking about automation?
Yeah, like the big one that I know we chatted a bit about with the Canadian experience is Canada Post. So Canada Post is our standard delivery where how mail gets shuffled around the country. And, you know, a lot of people think of mail as an archaic system, but with, you know, everyone jumping online, having online stores, Amazon's in the mix as well that uses Canada Post, they're having to find ways to really innovate and automate the experience for their customers so that it's easy to get your packages on time. It's amazing just seeing how it scales. So now instead of me having, you know, to wait at home, I know everyone's at home now with everything, but typically in the past, you have to wait at home, hope that the delivery person drops everything off on time and you don't miss it. But now, you know, you can get texts that tell you approximately what time it'll get dropped off. I know there's apps now that actually aggregate all of your packages that are expected to be delivered, and you can actually have a feed to tell you exactly which items are en route and stuff. So rather than diving into emails to find things, everything is automatically in your hand and in one central source, and automation enables that, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, I love that. I know even, you know, Amazon from the last example too, when they give me that notification that says your package is 5 stops away, I have that moment, at least I used to, where I'd go, crap, am I home? Is someone home? Can I receive that package? I don't have to worry about that anymore, but it's better because now I know when I do have to leave my home to go pick up that package.
Yeah, exactly. It's like early Christmas, but you know it's coming.
Exactly. Cool. So one thing that we found when we were digging into some numbers here is that there was a Pew Research poll. Most people believe that increasing automation is going to have a negative consequence for jobs, or even in some cases, their job. Large majorities in each nation surveyed think that ordinary people will have a hard time finding jobs as a result of automation. This is really interesting to me, Sophie. I feel like I've seen the news article at least 6 times in the last 2 weeks about the automated robot flipping burgers. And I think this is what people think of when they get scared about automation, but it isn't actually something that we need to be scared of. But yet there's this conundrum in the world where people think that they're not going to have access to higher paying jobs, you know, more meaningful work. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this? How do you think about this?
Like with anything, there's always, you know, the upsides and potential downsides of, you know, any new innovation, new technology such as automation. And a lot of it becomes a very personal issue because you're worried about how it's going to impact you in your future. The 3 main things a lot of folks usually think about when they're looking into that is, you know, how does it affect your autonomy? How does it affect how you connect with others? And how does it protect your purpose, how you get, you know, fulfillment from the things that you do on a day-to-day basis? So, you know, we're basically giving away our choices with algorithms, but on the when you're using bots or if you're using automated workflows. But on the flip side, you're actually getting rid of a lot of busy work, right? A lot of that work that kind of gets in the way from really doing anything that's impactful and anything that really will help you scale, whether, you know, you're working, say, in a nonprofit where, you know, you're trying to find ways to meaningfully help the community rather than being stuck in the office, having to fill out paperwork or transfer information and make sure you're getting into contact with the right people. You have a system in place that can automate a lot of that so you can actually go out there and get some real work done. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's also, it's not realistic to try and put an automation genie in a bottle. There's so many people who are just clamoring for more meaningful work in the workplace. I think there's some interesting stats here to talk about on this slide. So 70% of people are in favor of using technology to replace manual and laborious tasks. I know I've been seeing a ton of comments in the chat already, people talking about, I want to automate this platform, this platform, this platform. That's all probably manual clicks you're doing today. So you are in the majority, you are with the 70%, and we are going to make sure we tackle that in today's conversation. 82% of people said they would welcome technology that would provide them with the right information at the right time. Yet another great example of automation. 58% of people want their employers to use more automation technology, such as artificial intelligence. This is an interesting one to me. The artificial intelligence is part of what's powering some of the things we talked about before, like Canada Post and Amazon and Uber, right? It's not someone sitting there coding. When someone's 2 blocks away from me, they're going to be routed to me. This is all real-time calculations. So that is automation. And finally, 55% have outright asked their employees for better technology to help them work more effectively. So it's clear that people are hungry for it. So maybe with that being said, what are some areas that you think of automating at a categoric level, Sophie?
Oh, there's tons of stuff. I know, like with anytime when you're looking at automating, there's really 3 kind of themes that you're looking to address. You know, you want to reduce stress. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever you're automating, ensures that you're providing consistent results. And you want to make sure that it's something you can scale. So, you know, if you're dealing with like office work, you know, everyone has administrative tasks that are tedious, that are repetitive. No one wants to do it at the end of the day. So you can just easily automate that. And it's often surprising, you know, I've sat down sometimes where I've like logged how many hours I spend doing administrative stuff. And it's a lot of work, a lot of time that I could be spending doing something else. You know, ensuring consistency rather than, you know, if you have someone that you have to follow up with, that you're providing basically standard information with whether it's outreach or even just, you know, a personal check-in. A lot of that can be automated and then just waiting for the person to reply back and replying back with a more personalized response as information is needed from them. So there's tons of ways you can do that so that you can actually provide consistent information and really scale what you're doing rather than getting stuck in the weeds.
Yeah, love it. I know Sophie and I both share this mentality. Front and Zapier are both tools that are built to do a lot of this. So with that being said, I think it makes sense to pivot. Let's talk about who has different technology solutions in their stack. I know we're going to have a new poll pushed here. I saw some things trickling in the chat before, people talking about the different solutions that they're using. Really curious to see what the people say here. How many tech solutions do you have either in your stack or your company's stack? I know the number has varied in different roles I've had. The number has been as high as 10 or more. And then in some companies, they keep it simple, boil it down to a small handful. So curious to see, let's see what the people are saying here. It looks like a majority of people are coming back and saying it's at least 5. And in some cases, it looks like some people are saying that it's 10 or more, Sophie.
Yeah, and we found the same thing, like with chatting with our users. I think the average was at least 6 different apps. And we see some partners or some users actually create very complicated workflows where rather than having to manually kind of connect or using, you know, one-to-one integrations, they're able to create this complicated workflow that just basically like a domino effect, basically just zips through and updates everything. Instead of having to do it yourself.
Yeah, so wow, I'm not surprised to see this at all, but it confirms our suspicion. Automation is the key to unlocking the more meaningful work here. We got almost everyone in the bucket here of 5 or more solutions now, majority in that 5 to 10 bucket, just like you were saying, Sophie. So yeah. I think with that being said, let's kick into some of the actual nitty-gritty topics here of the different examples of automation we've seen historically between Front and Zapier. So that first goal we outlined was, let's talk about reducing stress. One example that we saw of this was actually a pretty meaningful one that one of our customers here at Front had built out, and they did it using Zapier, but they were using AirCall as their VoIP, and AirCall is a channel that you can connect into Front to receive an inbound stream of notifications. They had their users at max capacity. So much so that they were missing a majority of their inbound phone calls. So a really interesting thing that they built out was they said, I wonder if we could get higher engagement with our users if when we miss a call from them, we send them a text message. Let's bump this into an async conversation where they can reply at their leisure and I can reply at mine. So I'll kick it over to you, Sophie, but they did this using Zapier.
Yeah. And this is a great example of, stumbling upon a real pain point that affects not only your team, but also your customers on the other end as well, and finding a reason to, to really automate to make your team work well and more efficient. So the cool thing is this user basically used a webhooks that are powered by Zapier using Front. So it allowed basically this customer to automatically send real-time data to Front anytime a message came in from another app. And so in this case, it was a missed call that occurred. And without this, they wouldn't be able to they don't have to basically do that manual check to see if something's been missed. They don't have to risk either upsetting a customer or a user and in case something important came up, something pressing, or potentially losing out on opportunities. Everyone's happy. The information is consistent because it's going to the right people at the right time, and you're able to kind of follow up with them as needed.
Yeah, this was an awesome one. I remember I followed up with them a couple weeks after they had implemented this and said, what are your users saying? And they said, our users are so happy. They didn't like calling us either. They actually were just calling us because it was the only way they felt they could get through. So they pushed it over to this async communication, and all of a sudden the users were happier, the employees were happier. This is what we want automation to be. It is not a terminator. It is not coming to take our job. It is actually just making our jobs better.
Yeah, and it includes that personal experience too, because when you're replying back, that's when you kind of tap into that.
Right? Yeah. The other component that made this really successful was they used the rule in Front to push over that webhook to Zapier that allowed it to make it when a new message came in on that air call channel. It just said in the rule engine, if there's an inbound message on this specific type of channel in Front, then send it over to Zapier. But there's also a ton of automation that we actually have just built right into Front. We have a rule library built right in that lets you do things like track SLAs right on the conversations and things like that. So this is stuff that before you'd maybe have to have, like a senior dispatcher on your team monitoring and saying, hey, can someone jump in on this conversation? It's 30 minutes have gone by. We need to get a response out. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And the rules library gives you a bunch of examples like that. But also, if you don't see something in the rules library, it's really important to keep in mind there are other ways you can leverage your other solutions using something like webhooks, and you can build that into your rules in Front.
Yeah, so let's chat a bit more about how automation enables us to be a lot more consistent with whether it's communicating internally or with your customers as well. It allows you to basically get around the issue of maybe missing certain pieces of information, or even something as simple as typos. When you're creating campaigns or automated responses out to people, that the information is always consistent and reliable as well as a result. So a good example of this is survey responses, right? Most folks will use surveys for different use cases, but typically it's to gather information from users just to get their input or even get the other feedback and whatnot. And so typically the responses are very reliable, very helpful, but you want to find a way to create to use that information, to use that feedback in an impactful way to kind of help and improve how you work and how your product works as well. And so this is an example of a team basically using Typeform and Front together, using their Zapier integration as it taps in. And so basically how this workflow works is that anytime a new response comes in from Typeform, a new entry, a message is automatically sent through Front to the appropriate person so that they can gather product feedback and gather initial thoughts. And in this case, this was a customer NPS survey. So rather than emails going to an inbox, it's actually imported, and the customers are able to be followed up with to gather more details and more feedback, rather than having to go through Typeform and filter through the hundreds of responses oftentimes. So the cool thing about this is it's consistent because you're creating automation that funnels the information to the appropriate place. You're giving the opportunity to really reply back when you see something really insightful and interesting you want to dig into. And the thing is, it makes the results very actionable. I think that's the biggest use point and biggest value. You can find things easily, and helps you scale.
And I think this one is really applicable even, if we remove Typeform. I know some people may be more familiar with something like Google Forms if they're asking for feedback, right? This is a plug and play solution here, right? That is what Zapier is, and Zapier can interact really nicely in that plug and play world with Front, right? So imagine instead of you clicking, send me the notification from no reply at, imagine if when the user types in bob@bobscomputers.com, what if you received that email in Front as if Bob had sent you that feedback himself? This is super powerful. We actually used this here at Front, and we did it with our onboarding team. When new customers would come on board, we would ask them at the end of their onboarding, what was your experience like? Do you feel equipped to run with the product? And if they said no, or if they brought up pain points, it was really easy for us inside of Front to collaborate with members of our product team or other folks. We had that context, or maybe we even just need to send a reply and say, hey, Bob, it looks like you said you're not equipped to start using Front yet. Do you want to schedule some more time to chat? We were ready to do that. We didn't have to go digging and copy and paste the email address from somewhere. So this is a really, really key one. This was huge for my team, I know personally.
Yeah, and we use surveys in a similar way for internal NPS surveys, where we get a lot of feedback, and it helps gather a lot of insights that you can actually use. And the best thing too about automating it is you can actually focus on the responses that really matter. If everyone else is fine, they don't need as much support, then great. But you want to dig into those folks that need some more help or have questions, basically.
Yeah, I love it. Make the responses dynamic. Don't just leave it stagnant inside a Google Sheet somewhere. Pull it into something meaningful for you. I love it. So I think that actually transitions really well into our next item here, which is transposing different software apps into a consistent workflow. I know we actually kind of hinted at this here with the idea of the plug and play, but I think one of the biggest stressors that employees have repeatedly vocalized is that they're working in so many different applications. I mean, think back to the poll we asked earlier, even just the people on this webinar, who are the people who want to solve the automation problem. Most of them have 5 or more different solutions in play. This is a crazy amount of context switching that people are doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and it's...
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, and the great thing is too, when you're using tools like Front and Zapier together as you're creating workflows, and the great thing is, one, there's no code involved. It's easy. You can just basically plug and play, pick and choose which type of tools you use. I know Zapier has well over 25 other integrations that you can tap into Front with. So really, the world's your oyster when it comes to automating. And the great thing is too, I know a bunch of folks in the chat mentioned the amount of hours that they're hoping to save by automating. And the great thing, we've done our own studies, and it validates that, where not only do you save time, you also save a ton of money. I know the average Zapier user saves well over $10,000 a year just by automating simple tasks. With teams, that's even more. So it's definitely a great way to scale up, make sure that you're able to kind of focus on important work, and really stack different tools as you work with. A lot of teams, like I myself, I work with well over a dozen different apps on a day-to-day basis. And so creating ways to really transfer information, create consistent, feedback with my team, externally with partners, for a support team that's with our users as well. It saves so much time and makes everybody happy.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that I've heard sometimes when I introduce Zapier to a customer is they go, oh, well, but aren't they going to charge me? This is going to be an added cost for my business. I think if you're going into that conversation thinking of it that way, you're already thinking of it the wrong way, because you hinted at something really important there, Sophie. You have to think about the amount of man or woman hours that you are saving by using a tool like Zapier, right? It may cost you a few $100s to automate something per month in Zapier, but how many resource hours did you save? Most likely a lot more than the cost of whatever you're spending on a solution like Zapier. I think that's a huge level set that you have to go into this with.
Yeah, and by being able to automate that, you're able to actually focus on things that allow you to scale and grow, right? That brings in revenue, or if you're maybe a nonprofit that brings in more fundraising dollars, can help you grow. So you can focus on the things that really make sense rather than getting bogged down on tedious tasks that really aren't helping you kind of expand and grow your team. But yeah, and the nice thing is too with Zapier, we do have a trial, and we do have a free account as well for people to really kind of dip their toes in and test it out. And if you're ever stuck, we have an awesome support team that will actually help you as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think this is a good segue into our last goal for automation here.
Yes. So scaling is so important. Regardless of what you're doing, you're always wanting to find a way to, to build, to improve, to grow your business, to grow your team, and to excel. And so I think with automating tasks that take up a ton of time, tasks that aren't really, that are essential and important but aren't really necessary for the end game, right? Automation is really one of the best ways to do it, regardless of what type of tool you're using. It just helps make it easier to scale and grow your team rather than getting bogged down in details. And so one of the more common use cases that Zapier sees, and also especially when working with Front, is finding ways to really synchronize your contacts. So I'll give myself an example. I have Gmail, I have our CRM, we have our email marketing tools, and a number of other things depending on what team you're talking about. All of them have contact lists. And everyone knows the pain point of having to make sure like every single contact, every detail is up to date, whether it's the person's email, the phone number, or anything, one slight anything that's out of date could cause other issues, such as, if you have an important update you have to send out and the right person isn't getting it, that causes a problem, right? So having a tool that allows you to really tap into all those things, like the example that we gave is updating contacted CRM with this workflow. So how this works is that basically you have a trigger, which is a new contact is updated in Salesforce. Automatically, it'll make sure to create a contact in Front, and make sure that information is updated in your Front account as well. You could actually spin this out as well too, where you can make a more complicated workflow where it'll actually search and cross-reference if there are any duplicates. So you can make it as simple as this, or you can add multiple steps and filter and search and even capture more details. So it's a great way to really make sure that information is consistent across teams so that you can scale using other tools rather than spending time to make sure that your contact details are on point, basically, there.
Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of people are afraid of when they think about a solution like this is they go, well, I'm just going to end up creating a bunch of duplicates in my platform. And one of the key discoveries for me when I was using Zapier was you don't have to be worried about that. There's a step you can add in called paths, which let you say, if this is true, I want to go here. And if this is true, I want to go here. This is a really great way to build in something that'll do that deduplication for you, to make sure you aren't creating 20 different records. But also, even more so, there's actually a lot of the actions that you can trigger inside Zapier that have this built in, where they say, if there's an existing, I want you to update it. But if it's a new one, I want you to create it. So don't be afraid of this workflow, because the fact of the matter is it can actually help you significantly improve the user experience. I'll give an example here. Front is a company who has a team in Paris, and we have a team in San Francisco. We have a new team in Phoenix as well, but you can imagine those are two dramatically different time zones. When we get an inbound sales lead, the last thing we want to do is be assigning that inbound sales lead or assigning that support request to a team member who's in a totally different time zone. So one of the ways we accomplish this is you could synchronize those contacts into Front and synchronize in some of those fields. Maybe it's the region or the country, and then use Front's rule engine to trigger based off those fields. This is something that's a fairly newer feature from earlier this year, but in the example you can see on the screen here, it's, when there's a new inbound message, and the conversation is in this specific inbox. I want to use the contact data that I've synchronized, and I'm going to use this location field as my attribute to key off of. The example here would be, what if after doing all this, you could say, okay, then move it to this team instead. Now you don't have members on your Paris team staying up late trying to reply to members in America, and you don't have members in America staying up late or waking up early trying to reply to members that your Paris team could be replying to. This is a huge key for automation. And I think it's fairly applicable even outside of front. If we just talk about the general idea of intelligent routing, this is something we see day in and day out in solutions on the marketplace today. So with that being said, I think I would love, I know we're at the half-hour mark here. I'd love to turn it over to some questions. I see we already have one here that came in. So feel free to pop into that questions tab, drop in some questions. I know we have one here right now, which is, are there integrations available with QuickBase? Sophie, do you want to maybe talk about how users can go into Zapier and how they can actually locate what integrations are available and what actions might be available for them?
Yeah, great question. So we do have an integration with QuickBase. So that's a quick start. So if you go to zapier.com/apps, it'll actually take you to our app directory. And what you can do is just go in there, do a quick search at the top search bar there, and find any type of tool that you're looking for. And like I said, we have well over 2,500 different apps in our system. So I'd be surprised if you couldn't find what you're looking for. If you don't find what you're looking for, feel free to contact our support team, and then they'll relay that to the partnerships team so that we can see if we can help you with that and get the process going.
Yeah, Sophie, it looks like we got another question for you. How do you use Zapier internally to support remote work?
There's a few ways that we use it. So we, one thing that I think a lot of people are kind of getting used to with remote work is all the Zoom meetings and chats and having to connect and chat with things, asynchronously. So one of the big things, since we have tons of meetings that go on, and like Front, we are a fully remote team. We have folks in Europe, Asia, South America, Canada, US, like everywhere. And time zones can be a complicated thing. So we actually have bots that, when somebody adds a calendar update, updates the contacts that need to be in the meeting, it sends out an invite. We use Slack internally, and we have an automation that sets up that actually also will tag people that are supposed to be at the meeting and include the document that they're supposed to be reviewing as well. Rather than going through emails or just kind of searching through folders and files trying to find stuff, we make it easy for you to show up to meetings prepared with the information ready to contribute and share your thoughts. So that's one of the biggest kind of common ways doing that. Also, our support team uses our automations extensively as well. I use it for a lot of outreach and connecting with partners to kind of automate any type of updates, for instance. So if I have, we have thousands of partners, instead of emailing them individually, if I have an update, I'll actually set up an email automation that gets all the information out in one go, where I kind of incorporate Google Sheets, for example, where I put an X on the send column that I create in there, and then the email that triggers an email that gets sent out to everyone individually. So rather than me doing it manually, it does it for me. If anyone has questions that I've reached out to, they reply back to me, and I reply back with a personal response based on what their questions are.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even just to add to that, I know I've used Zapier in the past personally as a user to automate my status in other applications. I think that's really applicable to the remote work world, right? So imagine if I'm going into a meeting based off my calendar, and I'm going to change my status in another application to away. This is something that usually you can do inside of Zapier, and it can make it so that you're focusing on the task at hand. You're not worried about the different pings coming at you from different applications. This is something I think is huge for remote work. We're all probably feeling a little bit strung like taffy right now, and we're worried that we're going to break, right? So keep that focus on whatever the task is you're working on at that moment in time. Zapier can help you accomplish that.
Yeah, we have another great question here. So Deborah's asking, what are some tips to discover areas we can automate? I have a hard time figuring out the best techniques. You're not the only one, Deborah. It's always tricky, especially when you have so many tools that you can use, and especially if this is your first time automating. The great thing is when you do go to our app directory, which is at zapier.com/apps, find the apps that you're wanting to work with. Front, for example, has an amazing list of what we call Zap templates, which are pre-templated workflows. So if you're kind of getting started for the first time, try out some of those Zap templates. What it works, it basically does all of the work for you. All you have to do is just authenticate access for the apps that you're wanting to connect, and you're basically good to go. That's a great way of really getting started. If you want to try it out yourself, if you go to the directory, go to any page related to any of the apps that you're looking at, and it allows you to kind of search and connect different apps. But worst case scenario, if you're still not sure, just reach out to our support team. We're always happy to help. We're here to help you figure out workflows that might make sense if you're stuck or just need help brainstorming some things.
Yeah, and I'd love to add to that too. I think one of the beauties of Zapier is because there is that option to just sort of like plug and play things. A lot of times I end up finding customers like using Zapier, even just if nothing else, as a proof of concept, right? It's a great tool for that too. Let's say you're thinking about building out a process internally and you want to see what the impact of that automation could look like. Use Zapier to build that out. It's really easy because you have drop downs where you can go and select these things, right? When someone came to me and said, hey, we're thinking of trying to get these type form survey responses into front. Do you know how we could do that? The first place I went as an implementation engineer was Zapier, because I knew it was the quickest way I could stand something up to prove that it'll work. And it did. And we ended up continuing to use it in Zapier. So I think to Sophie's point, just jump in and try it. If you're trying to figure out what you should automate and you aren't sure where you can, jump in and look at what connectors there are, see what triggers there are, see what the recommended templates are of things people are doing. And if you aren't sure, feel free to reach out to folks at either side, right? Like, we want to help. I think both Zapier and Front and probably every other solution in the marketplace, we want you to find that meaningful work. So if it means we have to give you some suggestions of things you can automate, any team's going to be happy to give you those suggestions.
Perfect. Yeah. And I want to actually add to that too. Like, there's so many different ways. If you jump in and just give it a try to either create, a prototype for internal use, or we've even had one user, for example, that I can think of off the top of my head, that actually used it as a proof of concept for a business that they were starting, right? They actually created, using, I believe it was Typeform and a couple other tools together, to not only capture inventory requests, but also log it and be able to kind of send out packages and stuff. So whatever use case is, there's definitely ways for you to kind of try it out, test it out. And, like Tony said, reach out to either of our support teams. We're always happy to help.
Awesome. I know we have one more question in here. So if you maybe this one, I'll pass over to you, unless they were directing it at Front. But Ian asked, they're working with a nonprofit, onboard Google Workspace. Is there any special rates for nonprofits? I would say this is probably a very specific question. So maybe depending on if you're asking about Front or Zapier, I would say maybe reach out to Sophie or I, and we can get you pointed in the right direction.
Yes.
Obviously, the thing is, like we were saying before, sometimes that upfront cost can be a bit of a sticker shock for either solution, but you have to also be able to frame it contextually and think about what are the hours that I'm going to save by using one of these platforms to automate that manual work. That ROI can validate some of those costs sometimes.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend, if you're curious about pricing for nonprofits or just pricing in general, you can reach out to our support team, and they can kind of help you out and answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions. Let me just jump in here and see. We've had some great conversations in the chat, people talking about things that they're automating, different solutions in their stack. Maybe we'll just give it another minute here about any other questions that people have. Feel free to drop it in the questions. I see one person was jumping in and saying that SMS automation boosts engagement rate. Thumbs up on that. Awesome. I hate getting calls. I love getting text messages.
No one calls anymor. It's like everyone just
No,
texts.
no. My grandma calls me. Nobody else calls me.
That's how you know family's calling you when you get a phone call.
I see we got another question that came in. Favorite Zap. Sophie, give me your favorite Zap. This is a good one. I like
Yeah.
this.
So this isn't work related, but one of the really cool zaps we've had is a zap that sends you inspirational quotes and stuff, just to kind of check in, being like, hey, that's also a fun one. We have a couple fitness apps on our in our directory as well, so that's also a good way where, you know, if you're kind of getting back into the gym, working out, having it send me like updates in Slack, where we have a fitness Slack group, and so some folks will log their running routes and times, and you have like the whole team kind of cheering you on as you're exercising. So it's, yeah, there's so automations don't have to be just about work. It can also be for fun. So make sure to play with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, my favorite Zap, the one where I like fell in love with Zapier. I'll go back to the example before this, and I'll say this was back, I think in maybe some earlier days of Zapier. This might have been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. This was before Slack had the ability for you to connect into Google Calendar. So I built out that Zap that said, when I enter a meeting, I want to set myself as a way in Slack so that people can stop messaging me when I'm trying to talk to someone in real time. This was huge for me. This let me like focus on the people I'm talking to and not see the little banner notifications popping in on my computer constantly. And for me, that was my favorite Zap because it was the moment I realized the power of automation. I know we have another question here talking about any plans for a two-way sync. Sophie, maybe do you want to talk about how some customers think about syncing data between multiple platforms inside Zapier and how they solve that?
Yeah, so the way with Zapier is set up currently, we don't offer two-way sync, but it's definitely something that's come up. But yeah, when and if we do offer that in the future, we'll definitely present that on the site and share that with users. But at the moment, I'm not familiar with any plans.
I think the other thing to highlight here, just as a user, is you want to keep one singular source of truth in most cases. You know,
Exactly.
a two-way sync is huge, but most likely you want to have one place be the trickle down and the ripple effect into your other platforms in your stack. That's what we've found success in here at Front. As far as like synchronizing our contacts, we have one source of truth. It's our backend database. We trickle down all of those into other systems. I know the last company I was at before Front as well, it was the exact same approach. So I think the two-way sync is a beautiful thing, but it also, you know, one of the other things to highlight is, let's say you're going with that contact sync flow between Zapier and Front, and maybe you need to update something inside of, let's say, your Salesforce record or your other CRM. There's also some other ways you can think about tackling that. You know, Front has a plugin panel where you can access your Salesforce contacts. If you need to go in and make a change to that, you know, source of truth, you could go in and do it right inside of Front as well. So sometimes I think people get stuck in this idea that they need to have the two-way sync. You don't necessarily need to have it synchronized two ways. You just need to have an easy access to go in and update that source of truth, I think.
Yeah, and for a lot of users, most users, needing that like bi-directional update between apps, when you dig into it, that's not the, I guess, the real pain point you're looking at. And so if you think that that's something you're looking for, I would highly recommend contact our support team, you know, tell them what your use case is, what you're trying to do. And you might find out that doing a bi-directional sync might not be the best way of doing it. But yeah, it's all about learning. So feel free to reach out to kind of learn a bit more.
Awesome. I know we have one other question here, which maybe we can tackle at a high level. You know, someone's asking here, how can I automate answering questions that my customers are asking? This is an interesting one. I know I've used this before in Zapier, but there are actually some pre-built Zapier connectors that let you analyze the body of an incoming, you know, prior step. An example that I can give that's maybe tangible here is, we wanted to do something here at Front where we said if somebody messages us and they're coming from a specific account that we know, we want to reference our CRM to find out who the account manager is, and we want to bring them in on that conversation in front. We used a pre-built Zapier step that lets you extract the domain of the sender address. This is, I think, one small example, but can help paint the picture of how you could do some of that, almost AI, if you will, to analyze the body of a prior step. I believe this step is called a formatter step, if I'm not mistaken, Sophie.
So that's a great way of kind of tapping into that. And the nice thing is Zapier has a number of real estate and property related apps as well. So depending on what you're using to manage your Airbnb listings, there might be actually a Zap template in place that you can kind of try and use to kind of manage those incoming messages, whether it's you're getting messages through emails or if you're wanting to get texts as well. So there's different ways of setting up automations. And again, our support team is awesome. This is a perfect question to field to our team when you're saying, hey, I want to automate this chatbot to answer my customers. I have a ton of inbound inquiries coming in. How can I set this up with these tools that I'm using, right? So definitely reach out to us, and because depending on what other tools you're using, we might have to tweak that workflow. So I'm not sure if I can answer the specifics of that right now, but reach out to our contact team, and yeah, it'll help you out.
Awesome. We'll just give it another second here. I appreciate all the questions everyone raised. Sophie, I really appreciate your time. I love that we were able to chat with the users today about automation and the human element. Hopefully no one's walking out of this meeting today with the Terminator image in mind, and they're thinking about the beauty of automation.
Yeah, I'm always excited when I get a chance to kind of connect and chat with customers as well. So get different insights, get some feedback as well. So yeah, this is great.
Awesome. Well, once again, really appreciate your time, Sophie. Appreciate everyone's time for joining today. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, a great rest of their day, and everyone stay safe and healthy.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.